Subscribe, please.
Hey guys, welcome back. It's your favorite Gimp with a Limp, and I am here with a new game for you guys that I have been trying to get to the table for a little while. I've pulled it out, I've set it up, I've put it back up, I've pulled it back out, I've set it back down. It's been a lot of back and forth for me when it comes to this game, and that's because this game actually has some personal ties to me because I actually served here. I've actually walked these streets, you know? And it's a little different when you're playing a game where you know the counters, right? Like you could put names behind some of the faces that are actually on the board. It really changes the game up for you. And, you know, I learned it at one point and I sat down to go over it and then I ended up putting it up and, you know, came back to it and then we moved and it's been a whole thing. But I've been wanting to get this onto the table for a while and get it filmed. So I finally got it down. I was like, you know, when I get moved, I get set up. Before I get anything else really going, I'm going to get this to the table, and we're going to go over it. And this game is Phantom Fury, the second battle for Fallujah, and this is by Nuts Publishing, which actually kind of funny. If you don't know where the Nuts name came from, look up World War II. It actually had to do with the guys surrounded at Bastogne. I think it was 101st who were surrounded in Bastogne, and the Germans offered for them to surrender, and the commander's like, nuts. So it's a funny story there. But this is the Battle of Fallujah in Iraq. Most of you guys know I served there, and I'm going to give you fair warning, like right off the bat. You know, I kind of ramble as it is. Anyway, I'm going to ramble. I'm going to tell stories. I'm going to just do that throughout this playthrough just because it is so personal to me. So if you don't like that, you're just going to have to deal with it or watch someone else's playthrough, of which there actually aren't a whole lot when it comes to this game because I tried looking it up and there's not a whole lot of footage, which is another reason that I wanted to take and get it to the table and actually get it played. I don't think the rules are written all that well. They're a little kind of confusing. You kind of have to read through them at first and you're like, what does this mean? And then you get towards the end and you're like, oh, well, that kind of makes sense now. And then you have to kind of read it once, get an idea, and then read through it again to really understand the premise of the game. But I figure after a couple of read-throughs and some poking at it, I should be good to go to take and film this for you guys. This is a segment of the city itself. This is not the whole city of Fallujah. And it's kind of funny. I really can't take my eye off of this area here. And in the game, this is a mosque and wasteland area, and then just another set of buildings over here. And it looks so familiar to an area that I was stationed in. And it's not this specific area of the city. It was a different part of the city that I was in. But the road right out in front of it, and then the little compound here that was fairly large and had, you know, some buildings in it. So I'll tell you guys a quick story, a funny story about when I was in this little area. We had what was called the milk run that would be done. So we had our main base was outside of the city off over in this direction, and it would bring in supplies over through the road into the city. Now, again, this isn't the specific area that's actually on the map, but this looks enough like where I'm at that it makes perfect sense. Like it's almost verbatim. It's just eerie. But the milk run would come in and they would pull in here, and there was, you know, a big open area before you got into the actual compound itself that was walled off, which is exactly why we wanted it. And then there was some buildings over here to the right, and then a big compound building over here to the left. And they would bring in supplies, ammo, food, and also female Marines. Because one of the big things while we were there is being PC with the population. So we couldn't have male Marines searching females in the city and the outskirts and all shit like that. You know, they would complain, very religious, and they didn't want our men folk touching up their women folk, which I get to an extent. So we had to bring in females to take and handle this, and they would take and, you know, drive them into the city. And there had to be a standing outpost, and one of the outposts was me. And part of that was communication. So I was doing what was actually called a retrans site. And when you're kicking radio signals around, the signal only travels so far. It depends on what type of frequency you're using on how far it's going to travel. I'm not going to get into the all the specifics, but it'll travel so far. And what you can do is, say you have a radio way out there and you want to talk to radios way over this direction, well, you can put another radio in the center and you can set it to which you retransmit, and it becomes a booster. So it'll get the signal and then it'll keep shooting it farther on. So it kind of extends your range. So we had to take and be stationed out here. We always had to have a couple of guys there, just keeping an eye on the equipment, turning on the Humvee, fueling it up, stuff like that, just basic stuff. Wasn't a hard position to have. You'd go out there for a week at a time, be stuck in the city. And for the most part, you just kind of chilled because we didn't get any security type position, right? We had other Marines who were covering the security perimeter. Our job was just to maintain that equipment. So while we were in that position, we were generally safe. When I was doing 9-line runs out around the city, it was a lot more dangerous. But I remember, I got so many stories about being there. I'll tell you a funny one. I'll tell you one, and then we'll get into the game some more, and then I'll tell you another one later. I'm sitting there, and since it was 2 of us, we would do basically 12-hour shifts. So one of us would stay awake during the day. The other one would, stay awake during the night, watching over stuff. And it really didn't matter, per se. We would get up and hang out with each other during, a portion of our time. But I remember I was asleep because I had the day shift, and it was something going on in the middle of the night. And I wake up and I hear gunfire and I hear explosions and I think the compound's being raided. So I jump up, I grab my weapon, I'm at the door, I'm covering the sector, I'm looking out, I'm like, what's going on? And I turn back to my buddy who's there with me, and he hasn't moved. He's still laying on a cot playing a Game Boy, and he's not caring the least about what's going on. And I'm like, dude, I'm not going to say his name just in case because I don't want to out people. I'm like, dude, what's going on? Get over here. What's up? He's like, I don't know. Someone's shooting at someone. They're interrupting me. I'm on level 12. Leave me alone. And he's just focused the hell on his Game Boy, and he didn't want to get up and be bothered. And whatever it was, they ended up taking care of it, and none of it got over there to us, so I didn't have to worry about it. But I just looked at him like, you got to be crazy. But this is also the same guy that refused to cut his hair out of protest because he ended up getting, I forget what the hell they call it when they involuntarily extend you. Someone will have to put it in the comments if I can't remember it. Damn, what they call it when you get voluntold you're staying longer? I can't remember. They did it to a handful of people during the startup of all this crap, and he ended up getting stuck. So while we were on that deployment, it was like a few months into it was the end of his contract. So he was supposed to be out. So when his contract ended, he stopped cutting his hair out of protest and was like, technically I'm done. So, they gets my ass. It was kind of fun. I mean, I'm sure if, they got to us, he would have got up and started shooting. He would have been grumpy over it. So maybe he would have been shooting more accurately because of it. All right, we'll get into more stories later though. But like I said, this is just so personal to me because I've walked these streets. I've been through here. I've driven up and down this city so many times. I've got so many memories of it. Some good, some bad. So I guess that's kind of why I've been putting it up and putting it down. So if I do make some gaming errors when it comes to it, you guys please bear with me on it. All right. This is a area control type game. Okay. Your goal is to gain control of the city, and you're gaining control of all the different zones. All right, so a zone is going to be like one of these areas. You see there's a dotted line right there that separates these two zones. So we have zone, 5 and zone 17 here. Now the boxes that are actually in there, those are locations, okay? So you have locations within a zone within a block, okay? So that's how they've got this divided out. And then there's the street zones that are next to it, which you guys can get into. They don't generally stop there, but they can if they get pinned down in the streets. But that's where let me flip this thing over here. Your tank support is going to take and come in from the streets, and they're going to move up along the streets and provide support. Tanks are a great thing to have. Anyone who's been in the military knows you want to have your tanks. Depending on which version of this game you play, I'm going to play the historical variant, so it's going to give me 2 tanks and some more troops, but I'll have less time to take and actually complete the mission. But you'll have your tanks moving along through the city. You're going to take and try to capture the entirety of the city, which is all the little green dots numbered all the way up through, was it 61? So you have to gain your Marines having control of it, and you'll know that by that on the other side of the little activation symbol. You'll take and flip it over from activated to your control. The bad part about it is if you're not careful as you're moving up, the insurgents can take and retake areas that you've already cleared out. So your Marines are pushing forward, and as they're pushing forward, the enemy can take and come in behind you and reoccupy that building that you just took over, and now you're going to have to fall back and do it, and that's just going to cost you more time. So you really want to try to clear it in a very specific way. Something else that I like how they did this, because this is kind of accurate. Right over here, section 26, or zone 26, shall we say, this is the mosque, okay? And you'll see that it's red compared to the other zones. And then next to it, you've got the wasteland, which is yellow. And the only difference with that one is that no one can go there. You'll see there's no locations, nothing to do there. So it's basically just a big open area. The mosque, though, is very specific because the Marines cannot go into the mosque. And that was accurate while we were over there. They didn't want us going in the mosque. They didn't want us messing with that stuff. It was a holy area. It was their stuff. And they were trying to be PC about the whole thing and not have Marines going in and shooting up mosque and doing stuff like that. Which, of course, that means the mosque are exactly where the enemy would be, stockpiling munitions and explosives and all that other good stuff. Even when it tells you they didn't, they're lying. I know they did. I saw it myself. But because of that, you do have these little screwballs. Focus in. Damn it. Focus. Focus. Come on, Mr. Camera. Focus. Okay, the camera's not want to focus. There it goes. This is Iraqi troops, the IFF forces, and they can take and join in as reinforcements later into your game, and they actually can take and enter the mosque and take and attack the enemy insurgents and guerrillas and mortars that will take and appear in this area, but none of your actual Marines can take and go there. Okay, so you have to keep that in mind as you're going on with it. Okay, here on the left side of the board, I went ahead and zoomed in on the support aspects that you have, that these are not including the tanks that we'll get more into in the game itself. You have F-18 Hornet, you have your Super Cobra, the attack helicopter, and then you have your UAVs. All right, so we had all this stuff while we were over there, so they've got it into the game, but they've got limited amounts of it. I'll tell you what, these Cobras, I didn't get to see too much of the F-18s, but I did see the Cobras, and these things are friggin' sweet, especially if you see them shooting at night. It looks like a friggin' laser coming down and just blowing everything away. It's awesome as shit. But these guys are your support. There's a section of the game where you have your support phase, and you can take and call in these types of support to either get some more reconnaissance and activate the different areas, or to have, a strike come in and take out maybe an entrenched area that you have, you're having trouble taking and getting the suspect markers or the guerrillas cleared out of. You can take and do this. Now, there is a role involved when you're taking and trying to use these supports that they might not take and actually activate. You fail to call in your support, the call doesn't go through, something like that. See, that's why you needed guys like me calling in your extra support. But if it doesn't, then the enemy can possibly react to you, depending on what happens. There's another D10 roll involved with that. Okay, I went ahead and zoomed into the bottom of the board, or this is one of the paper maps. It is a cardstock map, though. It is pretty thick. Normally, I would have it under plexiglass to hold it down just a little flatter, but just to prevent any possible glaring for you guys and make it easier for you all to see, I'm leaving the plexiglass off, but I would suggest having a little of that just to help keep it flat. Over here is where you'll keep your Iraqi reinforcements that I mentioned to you earlier. And then over here, you've got your company and your battalion level reinforcements. We'll get into setup here in a little bit, but your basic gist is you're going to draw so many counters that'll go on your front lines, and then you'll take and put the rest down here into your reinforcements. I actually got lucky. I got most of my strong guys up here on the front to start with, but it means my reinforcements are a little bit weaker. So you've got these guys down here. And depending on what version of the game that you're playing, if you're playing the regular version, the 16 turn version, you'll take and incur a point penalty for bringing in these 3 extras here on the bottom. If you do the historical variant where you've got less time, then you don't receive that penalty. So it just depends on which way you go with it. Over here is the location for your tank reinforcements. Now these guys and these guys can come in on turn. No, these guys can come in on turn 2, and these can come in on turn 2. But I think these are a little later. I think these are turn 7 or 9. I have to look in the rules to verify that, but we'll do it when we're a little farther along. And the Iraqis come in a little bit later. Now the thing with the tanks though is that you have to have control of an area, and we'll get into control a little bit more specifically later, but like I said, that's when you actually have the counter flipped over and you've actually cleared out all the insurgents from the different zones. So you're not going to be able to bring the reinforcements in until you've actually cleared it out and you've got a stronghold, a foothold here. Kind of think of it like Omaha Beach. You know, you're taking control of the bottom, you've got the beachhead, and then you got to bring in your reinforcements and take and keep pushing up. Okay, I've got it zoomed in on a section of the board here. We're going to go over the start of setup on how you're going to get this going. Before we do, you need to make sure and take all of these counters, your activation counters. You're going to have enough of these green ones for the entirety of the map, and then I think it's 4 max on the reds. You can put anywhere between 1 and 4 of the red ones into your little opaque cups to take and draw from. And that's fortified area. So it's like a zone that the insurgents have walled up, put some sandbags in and shit like that, and they're prepared for you. So they're going to be more likely to be mortars in there and guys who are really ready to tear you up. So you'll have a little bit of randomization into that. These black ones here all along the bottom, you've got 9 starting ones. They're pretty much the equivalent of the green ones. They just signify that these are your starting areas, and they're going to start activated and start with the troops already, you know, drawn out, or the enemy insurgents already drawn out and put on the board when you actually start your activation. We'll get into the rest of it later, but basically once you control an area, so let's say we controlled this area here, every zone that was adjacent or neighboring. So adjacent would be like this zone is adjacent to it, and this one across the street is neighboring it. So any zones that are separated by a street, then they're considered neighboring. So if you have control of this, all adjacent and neighboring zones will then become active, and that's when you'll start drawing suspect markers. I had to remember a name. Suspect markers for it. I'll show you guys right now how the suspect markers are going to work. Okay, so when it comes to suspect markers, you're going to have another opaque cup. So like this, full of these little markers. Now these suspect markers are, let me come in from this way. Here we go. These suspect markers are potential enemies. You haven't identified it yet. You think there's a guy possibly in one of these locations. So that's what it represents. And the numbers and letter on there represent the areas that they're going to be put in. So as part of setup, all of these are going to have suspect markers placed into them and then rolled off for to see, you know, what they are. So this first one here, this 2-1R, the first thing that we're going to try to do for it is place it into a 2. Well, the 2's already open, so we can place that suspect marker right there and we're good to go. All of our troops are going to start where it's colored, and then it has, let's zoom in real close so you guys can see it. See how it's got that little house looking icon right there in the bottom right? that icon represents like your start area or your courtyard where you can enter from. Okay, so all of your Marines are going to be starting there. So you're going to draw 2 of these suspect markers for each one of your starting zones. Now that's going to happen whenever you activate a zone. So let's say we take over this zone, every neighboring and adjacent zone will become activated, and you will place one of those counters that I just showed you. The activated counters, either green or red, which you'll draw randomly out on the zone marker, the zone number there, and then you'll draw 2 random suspect markers for each one of those spots. So our next suspect marker is R for the top, so it's going to go R. R stands for roof, so you've got roof, second floor, first floor, and then courtyard. Now, there is a possibility of having multiple rooms, so that's why you'll have things like this where it's 2 and then 2 with a little hashtag or dash there. And then if you've got 3 rooms, it'll have a second dash. You're always going to start with the basic number itself, and then you're going to go to the one with the dash and then the one with the double dash. So let's take and draw our suspect markers for the rest of these guys real quick. We'll take and grab a couple out. And let's see, that's R. And this one also, okay, so this is a good example. See, this is also R. So since R is already taken, the next one on there is 1. So we're going to go down to 1, and that's where our next marker is going to be. So draw out a couple more. Another 1. And then another 1. So this one's going to go R. And you're going to do this for all of your 9 starting areas. And there's a couple ways. It really doesn't matter too specifically how you do this first little spot. Here, let me flip that back over. How you do this first spot. You could just draw the counters and then roll off on them. Or you can just set them all off and then roll off on them. It really doesn't matter. The basic gist is you're drawing 2 of those counters and then rolling to see if they activate. And if they do activate, what enemies are there, and then placing those enemies down. I'll show that to you here in just a sec. So let's take and get these other couple done. We got another 2. I don't know. I might, if this takes too long, I might cut it down a little bit in the video. I'll wait and see what happens in the editing. Okay, this game operates off of a D10. It only comes with a single D10. I would suggest grabbing out at least 1 more because there's sometimes where you're going to need to roll more than 1 die. Not that big of a deal though if you don't have the extra one, but it does help to have another one that's different color just in case. Make the game go a little faster. Now, also here, you guys can see, like I said, I've already got my squads set out. I do have a cat team in this location. This is an anti-tank support group. They have explosives that they can use to breach walls. So that's awesome stuff. And they also come with a munitions counter for their rockets, which you guys can see there's 4 at the top. You're going to rotate it 90 degrees every time you use it. It gives you a +2 bonus when you're in fire combat. So, higher chance to take and do damage. So it's adding a +2 to the Marines in a combat factor, which on these guys you see is a 6. So that would bump them up. Now that team can take a wound as well though. My idea is to kind of use those guys up quickly, just in case there's wounds coming through. That way I'm using the munitions, I'm taking these guys down quick, get a quick burst up into the map itself, because I don't want my main Marines taking damage. Not that I want any of my Marines taking damage, but just in case, because if the cat team gets killed or the main group of Marines get killed, like if this squad dies, all this stuff goes with it. Okay, so we wouldn't be able to take and have the cat team stay on their own. So might as well burn them up quick just in case we end up losing them later. All right, but we'll touch on that more here in a little bit. Once we've got all these down, like I said, we got to roll off on them. Let me grab my little play right here. Where is it? That's the reaction table. Okay, here we go. On the bottom right, normal zone. See, 1 to 5 is a dummy, so that's nothing. 6 to 8 is going to be a gorilla. 9 is mortars, and those guys, you know, just stay and don't do anything. And 0 is effectively for this first area, as 0 is going to be the same thing as a dummy start. But later on, that can be potentially an IED, which is what hit my dumbass, or a sniper attack, which I also know about, but I'll tell you guys that story later. Okay, so we're going to start rolling on these, and we got to roll for each one of our suspect markers all the way across the board to see what we're going to have. And they're going to come from another opaque container that has all of these guys in it. On one side, it's going to have your gorilla with their combat factor. And then on the other side, it's going to have your mortars with their combat factor. You see, most part, they have low combat factors. There are some of them. Let's see, I think I see one with a little higher. No, of course I didn't pick it up. Some of them go up to like 4, but most of them are going to be 1s, 2s, maybe 3s. They're not that strong or technically trained, but there's a lot of them that we have to take and fight as we go through. So let's take and roll. Hopefully we'll get a lot of 1 through 5s or 10s, so we're not having a whole bunch to start with, and we can get a whole bunch of control right off the bat. 2, okay, I'm good with that. Toss that over there. We'll roll for our next one. 1, I'm good with that. Okay, and we're just going to keep doing this all the way across the line. All right, this die is starting off a lot better than it did before. 4, I'm good there. And 3, oh, okay. We got to get some, but I'm good with this. 7, okay, 7 is going to be a gorilla. So let's draw for a gorilla. All right, so this is a strength 1 gorilla. It's going to start off right here next to my guys. Now, in this game, you can't shoot guys that are adjacent to you. You can't shoot into your own zone. You're going to assault. If you play any 40K, the way you can think about it is you don't have a shooting phase in your point blank range right here, you know, in the same building. You just have the assault phase here. So we'll have to take and see how that goes. And there's a neat aspect to it called the flood. If you're in the top of the building and you're assaulting down, where you can assault through the whole building. I'll show you guys that later. It's a sweet move you can do. Ah, another gorilla. Urgh. I was hoping I was going to have that place cleared out. Okay, so 2 level 1 gorillas. That's not too bad. Let's take and roll for this group. 1, good, 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 good. Of course, this building where I have a cat team, it gets 2, but this one where it's just 1 squad, nothing. See? Look at that. Nothing. Oh, you will only have 1 Marine squad per zone. Do keep that in mind. So let's take and roll for our next one, and then we'll pan over and get the right side of the map. 3, nice. Damn, I am rolling shit hot this time. 7, more gorillas. All right. All right, we got a level 2 gorilla. A couple of guys up there on the building. And let's pan to the right. All right, we're going to start rolling here, and we're going to go across the board. 9, I think is a mortar. No, it's a mortar unit. No, not the mortars. The mortars do not give up ever. We got a tier 1 mortar here right adjacent to our guys. The gorillas, depending on what happens in the game, can retreat away into other buildings. The mortars won't. They're going to stay there and die, obviously, as such being called mortars. And a second freaking mortar. You gotta be kidding me. We've got 2 mortars with RPGs ready to go after these Marines, but they're Marines, so they can handle it. Ain't nothing but a thing. All right, dummy. Let's see what we got going here. Another dummy. Damn, what is it? I got 2 buildings so far. Nope. I got 1 over here that has just 1 guy in it. I was going to say, I've just got 2 buildings that completely filled up, and then the rest has been empty. So let's see here. 6. I think that is also a gorilla. Yes, that is a gorilla. And level 1. Pop him in there. And roll off on this next guy. 3. That's what I'm talking about. Dummy. All right. Another 3. Good job. And last one. I want to keep it, but I can't because it didn't go through my thing. Come on, give me another 4. Oh, gorilla. Damn. I should edit that shit and film. All right, so that takes care of that. Let's take and pan back out. Okay, at this point in the game, you're set up and you're ready to go. And you're going to start your actual turns, which, let me grab this player aid here. You're going to do your support phase, which is the stuff along here along the side that I was talking about where you're calling in UAVs, helicopters, things like that. Then you're going to do your reinforcement phase, and that's the stuff here at the bottom where they can come in. They can only come in along where the black zones are and take and push up from there, but they can't come in unless you control the zone. Now, we're going to control some of these zones just because there's no insurgents in them, so we should be able to start getting in some support there on the second turn and keep a good fire line going, because you want to take and with this game, with the ability, it's hard to describe, you'll see it as we get into it, but with the ability of the enemy to take and retake areas that you've already got control of, you want to kind of have a little bit of a reserve force as you're pushing up and taking everything, but you've got to be pushing up quick enough that you don't run out of time, but not so quick as to extend your lines, just like you would in normal combat. After reinforcements, fire combat, that's where you're going to be able to actually shoot. And the neat part is it shows you when it comes to firing, you can fire, like I said, you can't fire into the zone that you're in, but you can fire at adjacent zones or neighboring zones. So this area here could fire all along to all these other, nope, couldn't hit that one. That one's not neighboring. Oh no, that one is neighboring. So it could hit this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it could pretty much hit all the way around it. And then after your fire, you're going to have your movement. Movement is pretty self-explanatory. The only thing not self-explanatory when it comes to movement is the fact that all Marines have, if they'll take and zoom in, it has a combat factor that's shown, but the movement factor isn't shown. The movement factor is a understood 4. All Marines are going to have a movement factor of 4. The difference is going to come to your tanks, which you guys can see actually have a variable movement factor, which can change anywhere between 1 and 4 depending on your 1d10 die roll. And that's to simulate things like the fact that the roads were tight, they had IEDs planted, they were shooting RPGs down from the roofs, stuff like that. So the tanks were getting choked up a little bit, and sometimes they might be able to get a burst of speed and move up the road, but then sometimes they might get held up for a while. So neat way to take and actually simulate that when it comes to the game. After that, you get into your assault phase. That's what I was kind of explaining to you. That's when you're in your house-to-house combat. The combat we're starting off with is pretty much only going to be assault phase because you can't take and shoot into zones that have your own guys into them. So you can only shoot into zones that only have insurgents, and we're not going to have any of those until we start activating some of these farther along buildings. And then after that, when you get into the reorganization phase, that's simply taking in... that's your cleanup phase. Because when you're taking and doing things like if your Marines fire, you'll see you'll turn it on its side to say it's fired. Or if they get pinned, you'll take and flip them over to pinned. There will be a D10 die roll to see if they do become unpinned at that point. But you'll see that as we get into the game. Why am I not focused? Okay, there it goes. Sorry about that. All right, but now we are all set to go and get started here with the Battle of Fallujah. I'm definitely ready to relive this one. I've been, like I said, trying to get it to the table, and it's been a quirky one for me. So I'm looking forward to conquering this game. I don't know, maybe it's my albatross. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm going to cut this here. We're going to be finished with setup. We'll start with the actual first turns of the game, see if we can get some of these buildings fully cleared out and just start pushing our way up through the city. So let me know if you do like the rambling stories there at the beginning. I'll tell a few more about the stuff that happened to me when I took some sniper fire actually out there and one of the neat drunken July 4ths that I've ever had in my life that was actually in this compound as well. All right, that's going to be it for me. You guys take care. I'll catch you in the next one.